On November 21st, 1992, Tom Monfils disappeared after a workplace dispute. A day later, his body was found in a pulp vat with a 50-pound weight wrapped around his neck. Over 30 years later, exactly who killed Monfils remains a mystery. Welcome to the Monfils 6 podcast. My name is Damon Schneider.
And my name's Mike Putchell.
Tonight's episode is entitled The Scenario Game. So the authors state that this book points to the clear innocence of these men. However, the authors are reluctant when it comes to speculating about the exact circumstances of Tom Monfils' death. Why do you think that might be?
Well, I think mainly there's just a lot of unknowns because they point out that the crime scene was, if it really was a crime, but the scene was tainted from the beginning. Evidence wasn't collected. But also, I think another reason is that this really isn't the point of the book. The real purpose is just to point out the flaws in the investigation, and that there's 6 people, five, that they believe that were sitting in prison wrongly accused and wrongly convicted.
Yeah, so that's a good point. The book was published in 2009, and so at that time, everyone was still in prison except for Mike Pye. So the authors state, unless the real perpetrator steps up and accepts responsibility for his or her actions, we may never know what happened to Monfils, and we must accept that as a tragedy. What do you think about that statement?
Yeah, I agree with it 100%. It is. It's a tragedy that there's people who were wrongly accused, wrongly convicted, and then also that we don't know really what happened.
Yeah, I think that's, in many respects, it's the allure of this case, at least for me, is the fact that it's like the Bermuda Triangle, right? You're never really going to know what happened.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd compare it to the Bermuda Triangle, but sure, I get what you mean.
And the authors state the fact that much of the initial evidence in this case was tainted or destroyed is another tragedy. Not knowing the real answer, however, does not make these 6 men guilty. And we talked, of course, in earlier episodes, there is video of the night that the police showed up and just how many of the mistakes that they were making. And even the fact that they were trying to, fish Monfils' body out with, a hook, and all the damage that could have been done, at that point. Do you think initially the police, their initial thoughts it was a suicide and that's why they sort of manhandled Monfils' body like that?
I'd say maybe some of the investigators thought that it was a suicide, but we know, I guess when somebody said, "Way to go, Kutska," they could have been insinuating that it was a suicide that Kutska kind of caused, but that could have also meant that they were blaming him for something he did. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, it just seems to me that the way they handled his body, getting it out of the vat, to me it would seem as though they had thought it was a suicide. So the authors state that Monfils' paper machine was running smoothly, and he had at least 20 minutes to get out from underneath the microscope before the next turnover. He had time to take a walk to sort things out. So then these are the 4 scenarios that the authors state might have happened. So scenario one, let's say a forklift driver saw Tom walking and wanted to scare him for his participation in the tape. He got too close and a barrel rolled off his forklift and killed Tom, and then he quickly hid the body. So in terms of scenario one, what do you think?
I just think it's a possibility. I don't know if I would really lean towards something like that, but again, it is a possibility because again, if Monfils was killed, and what I mean by that is someone caused his death intentionally or unintentionally, no one's come forward. So we really don't know. So it's possible, but I'm not thinking that that's a likely situation.
Scenario two, road rage without a car. Monfiles died as a result of an argument with a single coworker that got out of hand. A guy got in Monfiles' face because of the tape and started swearing at him and calling him names. What if then Monfiles threw a punch, sending the other guy into a rage? And what if that guy grabbed a nearby hard object and hit Monfiles, sending him down? What if that guy then panicked and he worked to quickly cover his tracks? So scenario two, what do you think about scenario two?
I think that is something that more likely could have happened. I don't know if I would see it going that way, though, the way that they described with Monfiles initiating the physical contact. I just don't see Monfiles being confrontational in that way. I mean, we know kind of his background. He kind of likes to go behind people's backs. He's not one to confront. So I could see somebody confronting him verbally and then that person then moving on to becoming physical. But I don't see a situation where Monfiles would initiate the physical contact.
What if someone were playing the tape in a tape player, kind of like mocking Monfiles, and then as Monfiles walked by that person, just kind of like their shoulders kind of hit, and then that was enough to send the guy into sort of, grab a pipe and hit him over the head.
Yeah, I mean, you get to a point where we could give 500 scenarios. We just don't know.
When I right around this time when I was around 15, it must have been 15 because I didn't yet drive a car. I'm not going to name this friend who did this, but he got into a street fight with a couple of it was actually 3-on-2, and it was during the winter time, and this one of the guys jumped on my friend's back, and my friend he kicked open the door to an upper apartment, and he climbed all the way up the steps with this other guy on his back, sort of like hitting him. And my friend, again, it was March, so it was still snow. He picked up a snow shovel, and he describes it this way: he hit the guy over the head with the shovel as hard as he possibly could.
Okay, why are you telling this story?
What's remembered lives. Losing someone precious from our lives is the most painful event that one can endure. Seasons of Life Memorials is dedicated to making sure the person you lost is never forgotten. We work with you to help you craft a film about your loved one's life that can be viewed at the gravesite. We can also help you create a film about your very own life that can be viewed in the obituary section of your hometown newspaper. Imagine that. Your friends, relatives, and neighbors viewing your own unique story and how your life truly did matter. Visit our website, seasonsoflifememorials.com, and follow us on social media today to start viewing what we can do for you.
Just the fact that if you're kind of like in a confrontation with someone, sometimes you lose. If someone has a temper, you can do something that obviously that was really dangerous. What he did, hitting that other 15-year-old boy over the head with a shovel.
Yeah, okay, but you gotta go. Who initiated the contact?
The other kid.
Right, that's what I thought. So I wanted to just point that out, that's not totally the same situation. Your friend was reacting to the guy who jumped on him. In this scenario, too, from the authors, they're saying Monfils was the first one to throw a punch.
Yeah. I'm just saying maybe it was just like a shoulder. They bump shoulders or something like that, and that was enough to set the guy off.
Well, yeah, now we're just making up anything, though. Like that's a different scenario, though, than what the authors put in for scenario 2. I could see that happening as well, the one you just said.
Scenario 3. An intentional assault. What if someone came at Monfils from out of the shadows and was behind Monfils with a pipe in his hand? So what do you think about that? So basically premeditated.
Yeah, I think that would be a real possibility. I think that's likely that somebody, I mean, they didn't say it, but I mean, I think that would be kind of like a David Weiner scenario.
Scenario 4. What if Monfils took his own life because of the intense pressure he was facing? What would his workdays be like from now on, now that all his fellow coworkers knew that he was a snitch? What if he had his union card pulled and lost his job? According to many who knew him, the mill was his life. So what do you think about that scenario?
Yeah, I'd say it's another likely possibility that he may have made a snap judgment decision under intense stress. It's a shame. I mean, all this what if this, what if that. It's too bad that we even have to say that because we just don't know.
We are going to come back to the documentary Beyond Human Nature in an upcoming episode, but one of the things the documentary brought up was the fact that Cal Monfils mentioned there were some suicide notes hidden in like a ceiling panel that fell one day, and that Sue Monfils just sort of burned them up.
The ceiling panel in where? In his house? In Tom's house?
I think it was a bedroom.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was the bedroom.
Okay.
But we'll come back to that when we go through the documentary again. We'll have an episode entirely on the documentary. So each of these scenarios, accidental, emotional, intentional, and suicidal, is far more feasible than 6 strangers joining forces to harm Monfils. Were these scenarios ever investigated? Not according to any source these authors could find. So what do you think about that? Why didn't the police, they must have sort of thought up these scenarios too, probably, right?
I don't think so. I really think that many of them, the lead investigators, were kind of had blinders on because of the whole tape incident.
That's a good point. There's the saying of walking around with rose-colored glasses. Maybe the investigators were walking around with glasses that just had Keith Kutzka, as the bad guy, and they just had to get Kutzka.
Mm-hmm.
Though the task would have been difficult to accomplish for one person without assistance, it is definitely possible that the heavy metal weight that was tied around Monfils' neck was first placed on the wall, and then that weight was dropped into the vat. In doing so, Tom's 180-pound body then would only require 130 pounds of force to drop it into the vat. So if only one person threw the body into the vat, if they put the weight first on top of the wall and then, pushed it in, so it would drop it, into 20 feet into the bottom of the vat, then they would only need 130 pounds of force to get Monfils' body to go over the wall. And we talked a little bit about that before we started to record, and we kind of mentioned that is possible, right?
Yeah, easily. I mean, someone can lift a 50-pound weight and put it on the wall, tie the rope around Tom's neck, and then push the weight over like you said. They've got assistants there to alleviate some of that weight when they lift his body. And then, I mean, you'd have some assistance too, just from the fact that, you could kind of hold Tom's body up against the wall and just kind of push it up along it and then over the side. So I don't think it would be that difficult.
So the authors state the cops may have stupidly handed the tape to Kutzka, but it was the company that sent Kutzka on his quest for the tape in the first place. The cops and the company then joined forces to pin Monfils' death on Kutzka. Kutzka was their straw man who would take both the police and the mill off the hot seat in one swoop. However, in the process of heaping blame on Kutzka, though, other workers would have to be painted as his shills. And why is that?
I think it's because they were connected with him once they started doing the investigation. Kutzka, with him being so loud and talkative that morning, he talked to a lot of people, so they did point out that he had a really strong and tight alibi, so they kind of had to poke holes in that, and because of that, they had to rope in the other people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Had Kutzka just retreated, into a corner on his very own where no one, and he didn't talk to anyone the rest of the day, it would have been easy to just blame him, and it would have been over in probably a month.
Mm-hmm.
According to every worker these authors interviewed, the experience of dealing with the police at the mill was excruciating. A coworker had been found dead at the mill, and now the cops were pushing you to say things that did not happen, and the company seemed to be nodding its encouragement. At first, the company seemed to be a detached bystander. Eventually, however, the company became an active partner in the investigation, even menacing its own employees when it felt it needed to. Why do you think the management of the mill decided they had to solve this case?
Well, I think once the coroner determined that it was a homicide, things really changed, and the company was kind of they kind of had their hand forced, I think, to have this be looked into and get it solved quickly. So I think that was a big component to it, was the ruling of the homicide.
Memento Mori, remember you must die someday. However, your life can be remembered forever by contacting us at seasonsoflifememorials.com. We are here to teach you how to create a film about your life that can be seen at your future gravesite as well as within the obituary section of your very own newspaper. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com. So, Mike, can you talk a little bit about how our new podcast option is so different than the standard obituary, and even maybe a little bit about the cost between doing a really, really in-depth podcast episode versus maybe just a few lines in the newspaper?
Sure. So one of the big things that I think a lot of people are shocked by, if they've never had to deal with a close loved one dying, is the cost of paper obituaries. A lot of times, I mean, even just for a small paragraph, it's typically around over $300 in the main city newspaper. So quite pricey. And then certainly if somebody wants to do a more in-depth obituary, like a half a page obituary, that's over $1,000 typically for something like that. And even with a half page obituary, you can't come anywhere close to the detail of somebody's life that you would in this podcast. And certainly if a half page obituary you can't come close, then a small paragraph obituary is definitely not going to come close. Usually all you are able to put in there are kind of just the name and date of death details, birthday, who the survivors are, and maybe a one line about, the person's working history, like the company that they worked for, and just some hobbies and interests that they had. No room for details. And again, for basically the same cost, well, certainly less than the half-page obituary cost, we really have limitless options of the detail that you can put in. And like we said, the QR codes that you can put in the paper obituaries link to this podcast. They would link to the videos. They would link to whatever services that you would want to do for the loved one. And there's really just no comparison between the amount of detail that can be put into our podcasts, our videos. It's really unmatched. So again, we highly recommend take a look at the website, seasonsoflifememorials.com. Reach out to us over social media or the email if you'd like to do that. We can certainly talk more about these services. It's really something to consider, and again, something that funeral homes are not offering. We're not seeing this really offered anywhere else by other companies. It's really worth the time to take a look at if you're looking to memorialize a loved one in a truly unique and memorable way.
And we're back. The police theory of what happened to Monfils was unproven, but that's what they were trying to hammer home. The mill's honest workers could not provide facts that would support the theory, and that dilemma caused many sleepless nights for the workers and their loved ones. The company's first mistake came at Keith Kutzka's disciplinary hearing when, on November 11th, 1992, at the end of the meeting, where Keith had denied he had anything in the bag, meeting manager Paul Dolson told Kutzka that the call to the Green Bay Police Department about the theft had come from within the mill. So this Paul Dolson, why do you think he felt it necessary to tell Kutzka that it came from within the mill?
I don't know. I believe I said this on the show I may be mistaken, but I remember when we were talking about all the things that were going on that led up to Tom being found dead, I believe that I said I don't understand why the management even told Keith that someone inside the mill made the phone call. I mean, it's one thing to say, ask why, but I mean, any reasonable person would, you know that if you tell somebody that, hey, there was someone in the mill who ratted you out, to put it that way, everybody is going to want to know who that was. That's completely reasonable. There's no way that someone would be told that information and not care who was the one who did it. So for him to do that was just, it was stupid. I mean, I'd like to know why he did that. I doubt it's required. That would be a weird requirement. That should have been just kept private. They should have known that would have became a problem.
The author stated that had that information not been passed to Kutska, the best he could have ever done was to spend the rest of his days wondering why the guards tried to stop him. End of story, no quest for tape, no confrontation over the tape. The mill's blunders hardly ended there, though. Just as bizarre, a mysterious phone call was placed from the private office of one of the mill managers the morning of Monfils' disappearance. It was made to the police station from the office of the mill's human resource director, Jack Yusko, during the time Monfils was missing. On that call, a person claiming to be Monfils asked the police about the release of the tape to Kutska. The person who made the call has never come forward. There are only two things known for sure. Number one, the call came from Yusko's office, and two, a minute or two later, Yusko placed another call to the union president, Marlon Charles. Who made this deceptive call to the police, and why hasn't this person ever been charged for interfering with a potential police investigation? The caller was certainly not Monfils, and no mill workers had access to the office. So, Mike, you and I were talking a little bit before the podcast, before we started recording, that it must have been Yusko, right?
Well, I didn't say it must have been him. It's likely it was, just because of that time frame, with how there's evidence that he made a phone call a minute or two later. So, I mean, either it was him or it was somebody who quickly was in his office and then got out of there. So, it's weird. That's actually one of the more bizarre little tidbits about the case that really is a head scratcher. I don't know what or why somebody would have done that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
My theory is it was Yusko, and so he's the human resource director, I guess, at the time, and so he's just trying. There's all this like weird stuff going down at the mill on this morning of November 21st, and he just figures that maybe he can clear things up with a quick call to the police where he sort of pretends to be Monfils. But I guess that would be my guess.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to, I don't know. I don't know how that any information could be found out now, so many years later, but I mean, that makes sense. Your theory there, but I don't know. That's just really a weird thing, this call.
Rather than focusing on providing mental health services to its workers at that time, the mill hierarchy seemed to join the police and the DA in treating its workers as a group of union thugs. They provided an office in the mill for Randy Winkler, from which he would pursue his premature theory about a murder conspiracy. Early on, the mill imported a person named Frank Pinto. He was the lead investigator for internal affairs at the corporate level. According to most workers, Pinto started off his investigation even-handedly, but then when he drew too many blanks, he simply became an unofficial extension of the Green Bay Police Department. So why do you think the mill thought it was important to bring in their own investigator?
I don't know. I think they wanted to cooperate too with the police. Again, when it was deemed a homicide, that really changed things. So I think the company just wanted to kind of get this done with, out of the news, out of the headlines, and just get it solved.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, for however long this case lasts, it reflects poorly on, the James River Company. So Pinto and Yusko did not have any knowledge of the Bubbler confrontation from their own investigations. They learned of it from the police. Pinto and Yusko then set about to prove such a confrontation occurred. So they began to pick on an older mill worker named Don Bolanger. They pressured him without mercy to admit to seeing a Bubbler confrontation and to put co-worker John Minu into the mix. Bolanger tried to cooperate with them, but he had to tell the unpopular truth that he had not seen such a confrontation. Eventually, Pinto and Yusko browbeat Bolanger into vaguely saying what they wanted to hear, that he may have seen such a confrontation. For the worn down Bolanger, it was either that or spend hours more being grilled and having his job threatened. A disconcerted Bolanger would eventually be put on the witness stand where he told his version of the Bubbler confrontation as his job security still hung over his head like a sword of Damocles. A now retired Bolanger has told these authors he saw no such confrontation. So, if you had been in that position of Bolanger, would you have got on the stand and said that you saw this Bubbler confrontation?
I can't really answer that because I'm not in that position. I mean, there's two camps. It's the people who, I guess it's people who are willing to challenge the management, and I guess really see if they're true to what their threats are, the threats of cooperate or risk your job being lost. Some were more willing to push back on that, and we'll probably get to that in a little bit, and others, like Bolanger, were not. They were, in his case, I'm thinking, they said he's older, so he's probably getting close to retired. He doesn't want to mess that up. There was a lot for him to lose if he would lose his job. So I can see why he did it. But I can't say what I would do because I thankfully haven't been in that scenario.
New episodes of the Monfils 6 podcast drop every other Friday. Please join us again. Thanks for listening.
Have you recently lost a loved one and want to hold on to their memory forever? We create individual and unique video-based obituaries that will allow anyone reading your local newspaper or visiting the gravesite to view the video and your memories of the loved one. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com.